The following segment is sponsored by ELEETE Real Estate.
Welcome back to AM Northwest. It's an election year, so how does that impact the housing market? Here to tell us what we need to know, we welcome back ELEETE Real Estate's senior broker, Tony Appa, and senior loan officer, Stuart Sandor. Good to have you both with us. Good to see you again. I had no idea that buying a house during an election year even made a difference. Stuart,
it's just a trend we've noticed for the last 50 years, and if you look at the statistics, they don't lie. You can go back to 1971 where people started keeping track of mortgage rates, and it's a weird phenomenon. And every 4 years during the presidential election, rates tend to come down.
Oh, that's fascinating. So let me ask you then, Tony, so how are interest rates right now when it comes to real estate market?
So right now they're about 7% depending on your credit rate. So
how is that? How does that compare? Is this a good time then to buy a house?
I always think it's a good time to buy a house. I'm a little bit biased there, but it's a good time. And if we look over the 50 years, 7% is the historical average.
So, oh, it is. That makes. So how do you measure the increased activity then?
Well, I look at the activity I'm seeing on my listings and the amount of phone calls I'm getting. And right now, if we look back year over year, April of last year to April of this year, we've seen an increase of about 10% in closed sales.
What is it like leading up to the elections?
Well, we're in January, and remember we had those ice storms and all the trees falling off.
Oh, that's right,
houses.
yeah.
So
how quickly we forget. Yeah, you're right.
So the applications in January for people wanting to get pre-approved, which remember there's a correct first step when you go to buy a house. Ideally, you want to get approved to find out how much you can afford.
Absolutely.
Before you start having Tony take you around to show houses.
Right.
Most people do it backward. Probably half the people out there find a house, they just drive by and say, oh my gosh, I love that. Can I afford $1 million house? Well, actually, no, you can afford a $600,000 house.
Right.
Let's go show you some of those. So usually people start with the applications is what we prefer.
Sure.
And those were way down in January. Since then, February, March have all been much, much better, getting towards our goals of the number of applications we see. And I think Tony can attest that the traffic coming through open houses is a lot greater in the last month or two as we get into the spring market.
Yeah, I was going to say the weather's better, right?
Yep.
So we're looking at more people.
When the weather's better, people come out, they start looking for homes. Families with children, they want to get into the home before the next school session starts.
Oh, before the next school starts, right. That makes a lot of sense. When we talk about selling a house, what would you say would be the #1 tip?
The #1 tip for selling a house is getting it prepared properly, having good curb appeal, staging the home, and then pricing it to drive in as much activity as possible.
Then we were talking, Tony, Helen, one of the phenomenons this year with rates being where they are.
Yes.
People were used to the 2% and 3% during COVID. I hate to say it, but those aren't coming back anytime soon. So 7% feels high, but like Tony said, it's the national average for the last 50 years.
I remember when interest rates were much higher, actually.
Oh yeah, in the 90s they were 12 when I started, and people were excited when it finally dropped to 9 because it was single digits.
Right.
But one of the things people are doing now is they're negotiating on behalf of the buyer to help buy down the interest rate. And so that's part of Tony's job, is to call someone like me and say, how much would it cost to get a 5% interest rate with our offer, and have the seller kick in to pay that cost.
That's a great idea.
So that's a great tactic rather than trying to lowball somebody on a price of a house.
Absolutely. Good ideas. Great information. We'll tell everyone, if you'd like to find out more, all you have to do is call ELEETE Real Estate. We'll put the information on our website at k2.com. Thank you both so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
All right, we'll be